Luo Feng officially took over the position of garrison commander of the Heavenly Pillar realm from God King Bai Feng. To complete the handover, both of them split into 36 avatars and traveled to the different entrances of the realm. This led Luo Feng to reflect on the various clone techniques within the land of origin. The time primordial Tao could create only 3 complete selves representing the past, present, and future, while the space Tao also produced only a limited number of powerful avatars. In contrast, the life and infinity paths could create numerous avatars. But every clone required dividing one's soul, causing each individual body to become weaker. Most other grade Tao paths, such as destruction, matter, and causality, could not cultivate clone techniques at all. Luo Feng also thought about Yuan's path of combining illusion and reality. A path so difficult that even it had no reference or guidance to follow. After the handover, God King Bai Feng reminded Luo Feng that the Heavenly Pillar realm was not an easy place to guard. Although it was considered the first treasure land and only a guest elder could serve as garrison commander. The true explorers were the powerful members of the 2 imperial clans, many of whom possessed primordial bloodlines and terrible tempers. Luo Feng realized that even someone as strong as God King Bai Feng, whose strength rivaled King Tian Du and Emperor Gui Shu, had suffered considerable mistreatment despite his contributions to the flame-wind ancient country. Luo Feng also understood why some emperors viewed him as a threat. Even while he was only at the first realm of the godly king level, he had already fought on equal footing with the master of the Shi kingdom. Now that he had reached the second realm and possessed many avatars, his strength was approaching that of God King Bai Feng and Emperor Gui Shu. More importantly, his cultivation speed was unprecedented, causing Emperor Yan, Di Shi, and Di Wu to fear his future potential and attempt to remove his guest elder status to deny him access to valuable opportunities. However, the ruling emperor, Di Fu, openly favored him and appointed him to guard the Heavenly Pillar realm, leaving his enemies powerless. After taking control of the formation array, Luo Feng carefully examined its power. The 36 auxiliary formations were connected to a central formation controlled by Emperor Zan, and Luo Feng could only guide a portion of its strength. Even so, the formation's power was terrifying and sufficient to suppress experts such as Emperor Gui Shu and Wuxia God King. The formation surrounding the first treasure land was among the strongest in the flame-wind ancient country. Even powerful forces like the Reincarnation Tower would need leaders such as the Wind City Empress or the Earth God King to force their way inside. Furthermore, if invaders appeared, the garrison commanders and monarchs of both ancient countries would immediately join the battle. Luo Feng knew that his duty was not to allow anyone to enter freely. Since Emperor Zan could sense everything occurring inside the Heavenly Pillar realm, Luo Feng's existence mainly served to make it much harder to break the formation. Without a garrison commander, the formation plate would be easier to crack. But with Luo Feng personally carrying it, enemies would first have to kill him. Considering his second realm strength and the protection of the formation, this was an extremely difficult task. According to the information left by his master, the greatest opportunities in the outer region of the Heavenly Pillar realm were the 36 Heavenly Pillars. Luo Feng immediately sent an avatar to investigate one of them. There he encountered Yano Demon King, one of the top 3 guest elder godly kings of the Thunder ancient country and a supreme expert who followed the path of destruction and cultivated a primordial bloodline. Although Yano Demon King was proud, he treated Luo Feng with respect because many ancient experts already believed that Luo Feng might one day reach a level comparable to the emperor's. As Luo Feng examined the pillar, he saw countless secret patterns spread across its surface. Suddenly, these patterns transformed into the image of a boundless giant axe that seemed capable of splitting all rules and cutting through all existence. The scene was so profound that Luo Feng stared at it for several days before finally stopping. He felt that the vision far surpassed a complete origin-grade Dao and even contained a faint similarity to the blood-colored scales of the Star Tower. However, the Heavenly Pillar's patterns were much simpler and easier to observe, requiring only the willpower of a second-realm godly king rather than a will beyond the godly king level. Luo Feng quickly realized that the giant axe represented an extremely profound version of the path of destruction. However, he did not immediately immerse himself in comprehending it because his current priority remained mastering the 24 forms and helping his world life form achieve another breakthrough. He understood that the heavenly pillars were treasures that could not be easily comprehended. Even obtaining a small amount of insight and creating a powerful secret technique from them would already be a remarkable achievement. Afterward, Luo Feng successively visited all 36 heavenly pillars. Each pillar displayed a different supreme vision. Some transformed into giant axes capable of splitting everything. Some became endless rivers. Others became mysterious cubes or burning lotus flowers. Every vision surpassed the level of a complete great Tao. Luo Feng gradually understood that after comprehending a complete origin great Tao, cultivators had no clear path forward and could only advance by exploring blindly. The 36 heavenly pillars acted like lamps illuminating the darkness and guiding future cultivation. The pillars themselves corresponded to the 9 origin great Taos of the land of origin, with 4 pillars connected to each great Tao, including life and destruction. Luo Feng deeply admired Yuan, believing that this supreme predecessor had expended enormous effort to leave these guiding treasures behind for future generations. After his initial exploration, Luo Feng settled into a long period of cultivation while continuing to guard the heavenly pillar realm. During these years, several royal family god kings entered the realm. One of them was Tian Mu God King, whom Luo Feng had previously met in infinite space. Tian Mu God King was friendly and expressed admiration at Luo Feng's astonishing growth. Noting that Luo Feng had gone from the primal chaos realm to the second realm of the godly king in an incredibly short period while he himself remained stuck at the first realm. However, not everyone treated Luo Feng kindly. The emperor-level expert accompanying Tian Mu God King could not even be bothered to speak with him. And the royal family god kings from the Thunder Ancient country merely glanced at him before entering the deeper regions without saying a word. Luo Feng privately reflected that the Thunder Ancient country's royal members often regarded non-royals as servants, making the Flame Wind Ancient country seem relatively more welcoming. 27 eons passed peacefully. During this time, Luo Feng continuously comprehended the 24 forms. As his understanding deepened, the later forms became easier and easier to understand. Eventually, he completely mastered all 24 forms. At that exact moment, every avatar of Luo Feng located throughout infinite space, the Dream Domain, the Heavenly Pillar Realm, the Primordial Cosmos region, and Huyang City smiled simultaneously, marking the completion of another major cultivation achievement and signaling that he had reached a new level of understanding. Inside the quiet room of the City Lord's mansion in Huyang City, within the Star Tower, Luo Feng's enormous world life form sat cross-legged in cultivation. Ever since his spiritual will had surpassed the limits of a godly king, his world life form had continued growing without reaching its limit. Unlike his perfect divine body and demonic avatar, which possessed fixed growth limits, the world life form could continue becoming stronger as long as his consciousness and spiritual will were capable of controlling it. After countless years of research and preparation, Luo Feng finally comprehended the complete 24 forms. He had waited for this breakthrough for a very long time, although his spiritual will had already advanced to an astonishing level, giving him confidence that he could kill the master of Shi Kingdom. He still endured and refrained from taking revenge. He knew that once he exposed himself by killing the 3 masters of Shi Kingdom, he might become the target of emperor-tier experts. Groups such as Di Yan, Di Shi, and Di Wu possessed numerous treasures and, working together, were even more terrifying than Emperor Meng. At that time, Luo Feng only had an advantage in spiritual will and was not confident that he could survive their encirclement. Therefore, he patiently waited until he achieved a true breakthrough. At this moment, Luo Feng began reconstructing the fundamental structure of his world life form. In the old 10 directions world form, every life unit consisted of merely 10 particles that formed a miniature world. In contrast, the 24 forms required 240 particles per life unit, creating a perfect combination of 24 spaces and increasing the stability of each life unit by an unimaginable amount. It was not a simple improvement but a complete qualitative transformation. Luo Feng first condensed a single life unit in his palm and admired its perfection. Then, using his enormous soul and powerful spiritual will, he rapidly transformed millions and then billions of life units at once. However, the energy reserves within his world life form were simply too vast. Even with his tremendous efficiency, it still took him 32 days to transform his entire true body. His avatars located in places such as the Dream Domain, Heavenly Pillar Realm, Chu capital, and Shangji city also underwent the same transformation, though their smaller energy reserves allowed them to finish much faster. When the transformation was complete, Luo Feng immediately sensed the difference. The former 10 directions world form had been loose and cumbersome, making control difficult. The new 24 forms had much denser and tighter life units, making the entire body easier to command. He compared the difference to that between a 200-pound obese person and a 200-pound athlete, although both possessed the same weight. One was sluggish while the other possessed speed, strength, and explosive power. Previously, despite containing nearly 29 times the energy of his perfect divine body, his world life form could only display combat power at the threshold of the second realm of Godly King because controlling such a massive amount of energy was difficult. Now, with the 24 forms, he could effortlessly unleash his strongest technique, the Great Extinction style, while his body still retained enormous room for further growth. Luo Feng then stood up within the Star Tower. Merely releasing a trace of his aura caused the surrounding void to collapse layer after layer until only the membrane wall of the source world remained. The rules of heaven and earth around him naturally changed under the pressure of his existence. At that moment, he realized that his physical body had finally stepped into the emperor tier. In terms of artistic conception and perfection, he might still be slightly inferior to masters such as Emperor Chu and Emperor Zan. But the sheer size and energy of his world life form were so overwhelming that they compensated for the gap in quality. For a long time, Luo Feng's greatest weakness had been the fragility of his own body. An emperor tier expert could have destroyed him with a single strike. And even his terrifying life recovery abilities would only allow him to survive a few more attacks. Now, that weakness had finally disappeared. He also observed that the life lotus inside his inner world had grown significantly. The expansion of his inner world by thousands of times allowed the life lotus to become stronger, increasing both the stability of his inner world and the vitality of his body. Likewise, the greater size of his inner world meant that the chaotic whole undying light could be nurtured to an even more terrifying level. Demonstrating the flexibility of the world life form, Luo Feng transformed his black robe into an endless black river that swept across the surroundings. Every drop of water in the river was actually a life unit of the 24 forms, each possessing far greater binding force and pressure than before. He clearly understood that the world life form had no fixed shape, it could become a human, a beast, a river, or even a star. For a brief moment, Luo Feng felt immense confidence and even believed that, combined with the Star Tower, there might be few opponents left in the entire land of origin who could challenge him. However, he quickly calmed himself and continued studying the abilities of his new body and the best ways to combine it with his numerous combat methods. At the same time, in the Thunder Ancient Country, mountain-sitting guest had also quietly reached the Godly King level. However, his breakthrough attracted no attention because he cultivated through the primordial bloodline. Despite his progress, his hatred for the three masters of Shi Kingdom remained deeply rooted in his soul. Especially his hatred toward the Emperor of Tian Kun, whom he considered the true culprit behind the destruction of his kingdom. He believed that even if Luo Feng had become a second-realm godly king and surpassed the Emperor of Tian Kun in strength, completely killing him and preventing his reincarnation would still be extremely difficult. As he immersed himself in cultivation to suppress his painful memories, Luo Feng suddenly contacted him through causality and said that the time had finally come to act against the three masters of Shi Kingdom. The message struck mountain-sitting guest like a thunderbolt. His soul trembled with excitement, and for several breaths he was unable to calm himself. He immediately departed and crossed half of the land of origin to reach Huyang City. Upon arriving at the city lord's mansion, he sensed the terrifying spiritual will surrounding Luo Feng. It was vast and overwhelming, making even a newly advanced godly king like him feel that he could be annihilated instantly. Seeing Luo Feng sitting within the Star Tower, mountain-sitting guest immediately realized that his disciple's aura was no weaker than that of the monarch of the Thunder Ancient Country. Even so, he remained cautious. He reminded Luo Feng that this opportunity could only happen once and that if any of the three masters managed to reincarnate, they would hide forever and never reveal themselves again. Luo Feng calmly assured him that this time none of them, including the Emperor of Tian Kun, would be able to reincarnate. He explained that he would disguise his appearance and aura and blur causality so that even if the ancient countries investigated the matter, they would only discover a false identity. Moreover, He had deliberately waited until today because his strength had finally surpassed top emperor-tier figures such as the Mother River Master and the Wind City Empress, giving him confidence to face any consequences. Mountain-sitting guest was shocked but still worried about his disciple's safety. He declared that although he desperately desired revenge, the living were more important than the dead and that they could continue waiting if necessary. Luo Feng then revealed another astonishing fact. He would not use any secret treasures during this operation. Hearing this, mountain-sitting guest finally realized that his disciple's current strength had become unimaginably terrifying, far beyond ordinary emperors and monarchs. At last, the hatred that had tormented him for countless years was about to be avenged. His eyes seemed to ignite with fire as he completely accepted Luo Feng's decision and prepared to launch the long-awaited attack against the three masters of Shi Kingdom. Luo Feng and the mountain-sitting guest discussed their revenge against the Shi Kingdom. The mountain-sitting guest explained that among the 5 godly kings of the Shi Kingdom, only 3 were his true enemies: the Emperor of Tian Kun, the Wuxiang ancestor, and the ancestor of Blade Demon. The other 2, Kufeng God King and Liuyu God King, were not deeply involved in his past grievances. Wanting to avoid any accidents, the mountain-sitting guest insisted that there was no need for negotiations. They should simply eliminate the 3 enemies. Before departing, Luo Feng disguised himself by wearing a black robe and golden mask while imitating the terrifying aura of the giant eye from his dream memories. The resulting presence was even more frightening than his normal form and deeply shocked the mountain-sitting guest. The latter also concealed himself inside a specially refined golden armored puppet, hiding his true body completely. The 2 quietly arrived at the royal capital of the Shi Kingdom. However, Luo Feng discovered that the true body of the Emperor of Tian Kun was absent. By using both his world lifeform's inner world perception and the sensing abilities of the Star Tower, he confirmed that only a clone of Kufeng God King remained in the capital. Since intelligence from the Flame Wind Pavilion indicated that the Emperor of Tian Kun had been nurturing his primordial bloodline rather than entering any dangerous treasure land, Luo Feng decided to wait patiently for his return while keeping the other 2 targets under surveillance through his avatars. Meanwhile, in the Yan capital of the Flame Wind ancient country, the Emperor of Tian Kun was serving delicious dishes to Emperor Di Yan. Because of his deep understanding of materials and the primordial bloodline, Tian Kun's culinary skills had reached an extraordinary level, earning Di Yan's appreciation. After enjoying his cooking for an entire era, Emperor Di Yan finally asked what reward Tian Kun desired. The Emperor of Tian Kun explained that the Shi Kingdom had already conquered nearly all neighboring territories except Yu Kingdom and Cold Forest Country. Since Luo Feng and Yu Shui Countrymaster had formed an alliance, he no longer dared target Yu Kingdom and instead wished to invade Cold Forest Country. However, Cold Forest Country maintained a special relationship with Tianmu Kingdom. To help him, Emperor Di Yan agreed to send Yanshou God King, one of the strongest godly kings under his command, ensuring that Tianmu Kingdom would not dare interfere. Pleased with this result, the Emperor of Tian Kun returned to the Shi Kingdom. His true goal was to devour 1/3 of the living beings in Cold Forest Country, as consuming countless creatures would greatly nourish and restore the power of his primordial bloodline. At the same time, Luo Feng and the mountain-sitting guest were quietly waiting inside an ordinary cave dwelling in the royal capital. Suddenly, Luo Feng sensed a familiar aura and informed his teacher that the master of the Shi Kingdom had finally returned. Upon hearing this, the mountain-sitting guest's eyes immediately lit up, as the long-awaited moment of revenge had finally arrived. After returning to the royal capital, the Emperor of Tian Kun finally had a chance to satisfy the hunger of his primordial bloodline. For an entire era, he had served Di Yan and did not dare to indulge in devouring countless lives, forcing himself to suppress his instincts. The moment he entered the palace, he immediately ordered his most loyal subordinate, Yi Shu Great Saint, to prepare a large portion of food. Yi Shu soon arrived carrying a transparent bottle that imprisoned more than 80 billion living beings. Inside were around 3.000 eternal true gods, 50 million void space true gods, 50 trillion ordinary true gods, and 30 trillion weaker creatures that had not even reached the true god level. Gathering such an enormous amount of food was not easy even for the ruler of the vast Shi Kingdom. The tribes of the kingdom lived in hidden places throughout the wilderness, and many eternal true gods were the pillars of major cities. Capturing so many beings in secret required countless years of planning and a specialized army led by Yi Shu. The Emperor of Tian Kun looked at the bottle with satisfaction. The countless creatures inside had no idea that they were about to become food for one of the most terrifying beings in the land of origin. As he reached out to grab the bottle, a sudden change occurred. In an instant, all his physical senses disappeared. Before him appeared an immense rotating constellation. It seemed to move slowly, yet it crossed endless distance within a single flicker of thought. The Emperor instinctively realized something horrifying. The power contained within this constellation was even more terrifying than Di Yan himself. Before he could even attempt a defense, he knew he could not block it. He had no time to use the reincarnation secret technique. There was only one possibility: survive the attack or die. The constellation rolled forward and crushed his spiritual consciousness. His spiritual will was instantly shattered into nothingness, leaving not even a trace behind. The famous Emperor of Tian Kun, one of the great rulers of the land of origin, died instantly without any chance to resist. Inside the hall, his body still remained seated on the throne, hands stretched toward the transparent bottle, but the light in his eyes had completely vanished. The moment his consciousness disappeared, his body began reverting to its enormous true form. An invisible force swept through the hall. Luo Feng collected the corpse of the Emperor of Tian Kun, the body of Yi Shu, great saint, and the transparent bottle. Even Yi Shu's spiritual consciousness was completely annihilated. Luo Feng did not spare him because allowing him to survive could expose too many clues about the assassination. Furthermore, Yi Shu had long assisted the emperor in capturing countless innocent creatures and deserved no mercy. Looking at the 80 billion lives imprisoned within the bottle, Luo Feng felt deeply shaken. He realized once again how terrifying powerful cultivators could become after falling into darkness. The ancestral god of the snow realm had caused immense destruction, but the Emperor of Tian Kun ruled over a much larger territory and had likely devoured even more creatures throughout countless years. The stronger a cultivator became, the greater the disaster they could inflict upon the world. Even harvesting only a tiny fraction of the population under their rule could result in the deaths of unimaginable numbers of living beings. Luo Feng suddenly understood that his current strength was already enough to influence a portion of the land of origin. However, he could only change a small part of it. If he truly wished to establish new rules and transform the entire world, he needed to become much stronger. He knew this path would be incredibly difficult. Under the supreme rules, even ultimate realm techniques possessed a limit. The emperors and monarchs of the two ancient countries controlled the order of the land of origin, and they would never easily accept someone trying to change that order. Nevertheless, Luo Feng's determination only grew stronger. Cultivators sought to surpass heaven and earth through their own power. To change the fate of countless lives in the land of origin was also part of his cultivation. If he could not accomplish even this, how could he speak of transcending heaven and earth itself? For now, he was not strong enough, so he would continue hiding his claws. But when he became powerful enough, he would reveal them and tear apart the darkness that covered the world. At the same time, attacks were launched against Wuxiang City and Sword Demon City. To guarantee success, Luo Feng had first concentrated all his efforts on killing the Emperor of Tian Kun. The Wuxiang ancestor and the ancestor of Blade Demon were only first realm god kings, and Luo Feng was fully confident that even his curse techniques could eliminate them. The moment the Emperor of Tian Kun died, Luo Feng's other avatars acted simultaneously. Neither the Wuxiang ancestor nor the ancestor of Blade Demon had time to react. Their spiritual consciousnesses were instantly destroyed by Luo Feng's overwhelming willpower, and both died without resistance. Inside the Star Tower in Huyang City, Luo Feng and his teacher, Mountain Sitting Guest, stood before the corpses of the three rulers of Shi Kingdom. Their bodies remained perfectly intact, but their spiritual consciousnesses had been completely annihilated. Mountain Sitting Guest carefully examined the body of the Emperor of Tian Kun. Despite his massive size and terrifying bloodline, none of it had mattered against an attack directed entirely at spiritual consciousness. He asked whether any of them had managed to reincarnate. Luo Feng shook his head and explained that the Emperor of Tian Kun had died the instant the willpower secret technique struck him. There had been no opportunity to activate reincarnation. As Mountain Sitting Guest looked at the corpses, memories from his distant past flooded his mind. He remembered his first meeting with his senior sister when he was merely a young disciple. He remembered how she had guided him on behalf of their master. He remembered finally reaching the primal chaos realm and confessing his wish to walk the path of cultivation alongside her. He remembered the establishment of Jin state and the pride his senior sister had felt when he became its monarch. He remembered the dreams he once held, to become stronger, protect those he loved, and lead his sect toward a brighter future. All of those dreams had been destroyed by these enemies. For countless years, he had carried endless hatred, fled into the universe ocean, and eventually reincarnated within the primordial cosmos. Revenge had become the obsession that sustained him through endless suffering. Now, standing before the corpses of his enemies, he softly whispered, "I've taken revenge. I've avenged you all." Yet he did not feel the joy he had imagined for so many years. Instead, he felt only an overwhelming sense of nostalgia. More than revenge, he wished he could return to those peaceful days of the past. Luo Feng silently watched his teacher. Even someone with such powerful willpower needed time to accept that the obsession driving him for countless years had finally ended. Eventually, mountain-sitting guest regained his composure. He turned toward Luo Feng and thanked him sincerely, saying that he no longer had any regrets in life. Luo Feng replied that he was the one who should be grateful. For everything he had achieved was possible because of his teacher's guidance. Mountain-sitting guest then warned him that the deaths of these rulers, especially the famous emperor of Tian Kun, would certainly trigger investigations from the major powers of the land of origin. Their corpses had to be completely destroyed because experts could uncover many secrets by studying them. Luo Feng assured him that he had already made preparations. Finally, mountain-sitting guest decided to leave. From now on, he wished to live peacefully, devoting himself to artifact refining and the study of primordial bloodlines instead of pursuing revenge. Luo Feng personally escorted him all the way to the border of Thunder Ancient Country and watched as his teacher departed. As he looked at his master's figure disappearing into the distance, Luo Feng realized that the heavy burden and obsession that had tormented mountain-sitting guest for countless years had finally disappeared. This great karmic bond had shaped both his teacher's entire life and his own destiny. Silently, Luo Feng wished that from this day onward, his teacher could finally enjoy the peaceful life he had long been denied. After the sudden deaths of the three rulers of Shi Kingdom, including the powerful emperor of Tian Kun, Luo Feng remained in Huyang City and calmly waited to see how the two ancient countries would investigate the incident. Knowing that their conclusions would influence his future actions, the only surviving god kings of Shi Kingdom, Liuyu God King and Kufeng God King, were horrified after confirming through causality that the three strongest kings had died simultaneously while the two weaker ones survived. They believed that only an emperor or monarch-level existence could have silently killed Emperor Tian Kun, whose strength and primordial bloodline made him extremely difficult to eliminate. Fearing that the investigation might implicate them, both immediately began relocating their races and forces. Meanwhile, a white light figure, one of the 9 monarchs of the Thunder Ancient Country known as Skylight Monarch Di Jufeng, traveled into the past timeline to investigate the scene of Emperor Tian Kun's death. He observed that Emperor Tian Kun and Yi Shu Great Saint had their souls extinguished instantly without any chance to resist or reincarnate. After analyzing the traces, he concluded that the killer likely used an extremely powerful soul or willpower technique, a level of power possessed by fewer than 10 beings in the entire land of origin. Using a treasure bestowed by an ancestor, Di Jufeng discovered 2 hidden figures in the past, a mysterious man in a black robe and golden mask and an old puppet servant. Merely observing the black-robed figure's aura filled him with fear, and he realized that this terrifying powerhouse had never appeared before in the land of origin. Through causality, he also discovered that the mysterious man had freed the countless weak cultivators trapped in the food bottle, suggesting that the killer was compassionate toward ordinary lives. Di Jufeng reported his findings to Emperor Di of the Flame-Wind Ancient Country. Both agreed that the mysterious expert was likely stronger and more dangerous than the 5 Earth God Kings and could probably instantly kill anyone below the Emperor and Monarch levels. Since the mysterious man concealed his identity, they suspected he did not yet wish to openly oppose the 2 ancient countries. Unable to determine the killer's identity through fate calculations, Emperor Di considered 3 possible suspects: Pu Shen, the low-profile Second Realm God King; Luo He, whose willpower had already reached the ultimate realm during the Primal Chaos Realm stage; and Emperor Main. the greatest willpower cultivator in the land of origin whose ruthless nature resembled that of catastrophe beasts. Back in Huyang City, Luo Feng purchased intelligence from the Flame Wind Pavilion and saw the recorded image of the mysterious black-robed man and his puppet servant. Since the report required an enormous additional fee to reveal the exact cause of death, Luo Feng did not buy it, already understanding that the intact bodies indicated a soul or willpower attack. The Yu Shui country master then contacted Luo Feng, expressing delight over Emperor Tian Kun's death because the two had been enemies for countless years. He remarked that another terrifying powerhouse in the land of origin made little difference since many beings already possessed the ability to kill them instantly. Seeing that Shi Kingdom had lost its rulers, he encouraged Luo Feng to seize the opportunity and conquer the entire kingdom. Promising his full support, Luo Feng admitted that he intended to occupy the Shi Kingdom, but he chose not to act immediately. Although the three rulers of the Shi Kingdom had died, he worried that suddenly taking over the territory might attract the attention of the mysterious black-robed, golden-masked expert who killed them. Since the two grand ancient countries possessed powerful investigative and divination methods, Luo Feng preferred to delay any suspicion toward himself for as long as possible. He decided to wait a day, using the time to study the special inheritances *world lifeform and *chaotic whole beast body, while also relying on the terrifying power of the Star Tower to prepare for any future exposure. Meanwhile, in the Thunder Ancient Country, the powerful Silver Moon God King gathered two friends, Sea Demon God King and Tian Yi God King. Tired of serving the Thunder Ancient Country and being forced to accompany its half-mad monarch-level beings, even suffering repeated deaths and resurrections, Silver Moon decided to seize the ownerless Shi Kingdom and establish his own nation. The other two God Kings agreed to support him in exchange for territory. As dawn arrived, panic spread through the capital of the Shi Kingdom. Silver Moon God King descended above the royal capital with his two allies and publicly declared that the Shi Kingdom would become Silver Moon Country, ruled jointly by the three of them. However, they were immediately challenged by the Cold Forest Country Lord, who claimed that the Shi Kingdom should belong to his neighboring nation and stated that he had already gained support from the Tianmu Kingdom. He was accompanied by the formidable Dark Sky Venerable, one of the 6 great venerables of the Destruction Army. Despite this, Silver Moon God King was not intimidated and mocked their attempt to stop him. While both sides confronted each other, Luo Feng realized that powerful figures had already begun competing for the Shi Kingdom. Since others had acted first, he no longer needed to remain hidden. Instantly, he dispatched 5 silver-clothed avatars, each possessing immense strength and carrying a portion of his world lifeform's power. Together, their world power spread across the entire territory of the Shi Kingdom, covering all 135 primal chaos prefectures and suppressing every expert present. A majestic voice then echoed throughout the entire kingdom. Luo Feng announced his identity as Luo He and declared that from that moment onward, the Shi Kingdom belonged to the Blade River sect. 5 silver-clothed Luo Feng avatars appeared above the royal capital and looked down upon the 5 second realm god kings below, calmly asking them one question. Do any of you have an objection?